What if I told you the world's most luxurious watch brand, Rolex, was founded by a teenage orphan who ran away from home with nothing? This isn't just a story about watches, it's a story of a marketing genius who pulled off impossible stunts and built a billion-dollar fortress around his company.
Our story begins in Germany in 1881 with the birth of Hans Wilsdorf. His childhood started out normally enough. His family owned a successful iron goods business passed down from his grandfather. They weren't fabulously wealthy, but they were comfortable, solid middle class. Young Hans had a stable home with his parents and two siblings. But his world was about to be shattered when he was just 11 years old. His mother fell ill and passed away. As if that wasn't enough for a child to endure, tragedy struck again just 1 year later. His father died, leaving Hans an orphan at the tender age of 12. Now in the care of his mother's brothers, his life changed in an instant. His uncles, perhaps thinking it was the most practical decision, immediately sold the family business that had been in his family for generations. Hans was devastated. He felt his heritage, his last link to his parents, had been sold off. The uncles took the money and with good intentions put all three children into a prestigious boarding schools, hoping to give them a good education. For Hans, this new life felt like a prison. He was an outsider, teased for his religion, and he sank into a depression. But it was during his dark time that a fire was lit inside him. He realized he was completely on his own. He channeled all his energy into his studies, excelling at math and most importantly language. He mastered French and English, fueled by a dream of one day traveling the world. He later said that his uncle making him self-reliant so early in life was a crucial factor in his success. It forced him to look after himself. One day he had enough. At 19, he packed a bag, left the boarding school in Germany and moved to Geneva, Switzerland, determined to make his own way. His first real job was for an international pearl exporting company. This job was a secret masterclass. He noticed the company wasn't actually making anything. They were buying pearls, sorting and grading them, packaging them beautifully and selling them to jewelers for a huge profit. He learned about the international trade, about profit margins and about the business of luxury. Then a friend offered him a job at a company called Kuno Cotton, a major watch manufacturer in town famous for watchmaking. Even though the pay wasn't as good, Hans was deeply curious. He took the job. He was hired as an English correspondent, writing letters to the company. But his duties also included winding hundreds upon hundreds of pocket watches every single day and checking them for accuracy. Day after day, winding and listening, he developed an intimate hands-on knowledge of how watches worked and more importantly, how they failed. After a brief stint back in Germany for mandatory military services, he moved to London at age 22 to work for another watch firm. By now, he wasn't just a clerk, he was in sales, learning everything he could. He was ready to start his own business, he just needed money. He found it in his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis. Hans had a vision, the passion and the technical knowledge. Davis had the capital. They shook hands and in 1905, Wilsdorf and Davis was born. Their business model was brilliant for its time. They imported high-quality, precise watch movement from a small expert manufacturer in Bienne, Switzerland. Then in London, they would place these movements into beautifully crafted watch cases. It was an early form of a global supply chain. Swiss precision meets British style and salesmanship. But Hans was obsessed with one big idea. At the time, if you were a man, you used a pocket watch. They were large, protected and accurate. Wristwatch or wristlets, as they were called, were considered flimsy, delicate piece of jewelry for women. They were notoriously inaccurate because their small movements were vulnerable to moisture, dust and shocks. Hans thought pocket watches were a total pain. He found it clumsy and inconvenient to have to stop, reach into your pocket and open a case just to see the time. He had a vision that was almost unimaginable at the time. He believed the future was the wristwatch. For everyone, he staked his entire company on the belief that he could make a wristwatch that was not just elegant but masculine, tough and as accurate as any pocket watch. His company was growing, but he knew Wilsdorf and Davis wasn't a world-class name. He needed something new. The name had to be short enough to fit on a watch dial, easy to pronounce in any language, and sound elegant. He spent weeks trying thousands of combinations of letters. Then, as he later famously said, one morning while riding on a double-decker bus in London, a genie whispered "Rolex" in my ear. He knew instantly it was perfect. In 1908, he registered the trademark. Just as Rolex was starting to gain a reputation for its reliable wristwatch, World War I broke out. For most business, this was a disaster. For Rolex, it was a turning point. Army officers in the trenches quickly discovered that fumbling for a pocket watch in the middle of a battle was a deadly inconvenience. Coordinating attacks required precise timing, and a quick glance at the wrist was a huge tactical advantage. Because Rolex had already focused on making wristwatches accurate and durable, they became the watch of choice for many soldiers. The war helped prove Hans' point: the wristwatch was a tool, not just jewelry. But after the war, Britain slapped a massive 33% tax on all imported goods, including the Rolex. On top of that, anti-German sentiment was high, and a business ran by a man named Wilsdorf faced prejudice. The choice was clear. In 1990, Hans moved his entire headquarters from London to Geneva, Switzerland, where it remains to this day. He fully renamed the company the Rolex Watch Corporation. Now based in the heart of Swiss watchmaking, Hans Wilsdorf and his team went all in on solving the wristwatch's biggest problem. He declared, "We must succeed in making the watch case so tight that our movements will be permanently guaranteed against damage caused by dust, perspiration, water, heat, and cold." In 1926, they did it. Rolex released a watch that would forever change the industry, the Rolex Oyster. It was the world's first truly waterproof and dust-proof wristwatch. It had a revolutionary case and a screw-down crown, bezel and case plaque that hermetically sealed the delicate movement inside. This was the breakthrough. But a great invention is useless if nobody knows about it. This is where Hans Wilsdorf proved that he wasn't just a great watchmaker, he was a marketing god. In 1927, he read about a young English swimmer named Mercedes Glatesy. She was attempting to become the first British woman to swim from English Channel. Hans saw an opportunity. He gave her a Rolex Oyster and asked her to wear it on her attempt. The swim was brutal, and more than 10 hours in the freezing, choppy water, she was pulled out just short of her goal, suffering from exhaustion. The swim was not a complete success, but the Rolex Oyster came out of the water in perfect working condition. Hans immediately took out a full-page ad on the front of the London Daily newspaper, celebrating Mercedes' feat and the triumph of his waterproof watch. The world went crazy. Rolex became an international sensation overnight. And he didn't stop there. He launched one of the most brilliant marketing campaigns ever. He delivered his Rolex Oyster watches to jewelry stores inside fish balls filled with water and live goldfish. People would stop and stare, captivated by the sight of a beautiful functioning watch completely submerged in water. It was a simple visual and unforgettable way to prove his point. Throughout the 30s, he continued this strategy of extreme testing. When the first expedition flew over Mount Everest, the pilots were wearing Rolex Oyster. When Sir Malcolm Campbell broke the land speed record, driving over 300 miles per hour, he was wearing a Rolex. Campbell even wrote a letter to Rolex refusing payment and simply stated how impressed he was that his wrist kept perfect time despite the intensive vibration. Hans was proving that Rolex was the watch for adventurers, pioneers, and people pushing the limits. He wasn't done innovating either. The Oyster case was great, but you still had to unscrew the crown to wind it, which could wear out the seal over time. So in 1931, Rolex invented and patented the world's first self-winding mechanism with a perpetual rotor. It was a small weight inside the watch that would spin with a natural motion of your wrist, automatically winding the watch for you. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The Rolex was now waterproof, dustproof, and self-winning. It was the perfect carefree everyday watch. During World War II, Rolex took another hard hit with export. But Hans showed his character. He learned that many British and American Allied prisoners of war had their Rolex watches confiscated by their German captors. He made an incredible offer. He would replace any prison's Rolex and they would have to pay for it until after the war was over. Thousands of soldiers took him up on the offer, cementing a legacy of loyalty and patriotism. In 1944, another personal tragedy struck when his beloved wife Florence passed away. To commemorate her and to protect the future of his company, he did something extraordinary. He established the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Shortly before his death, he transferred his 100% ownership stake of Rolex into this foundation. Think about what that means. Rolex is owned by a charitable trust. It can never be sold. It can never be broken up. It will never have to answer to shareholders or private equity firms demanding higher profit at the expense of quality. Its profit are used to fund social causes, education, and the arts in Geneva, and to be reinvested back into the company. The world's most recognizable luxury brand is in essence a non-profit. After the war, Rolex took off like a rocket. In 1945, they released the Datejust, the first self-winning watch to show the date on the dial. A decade later, they released the Day Date, which showed the full day of the week and quickly became known as the President's Watch. In the 50s, they released legendary tools watches like the Submariner, the first dive watch waterproof 200 meters. Hans Wilsdorf passed away in 1960, leaving behind a perfectly structured, independent and dominant company. Under his successor, Rolex shifted its marketing to focus more on the image of luxury and exclusivity, becoming the ultimate status symbol it is today. They even started manufacturing their watches with a special, highly durable and expensive type of steel, making them one of the only watchmakers to do so. So the next time you see a Rolex, remember its story. Don't just see a price tag or a status symbol. See the legacy of a 12-year orphan who lost everything, a determined teenager who ran away to build his own life, a visionary who saw the future on our wrist when no one else did, and a marketing genius who used swimmers, pilots, and fishbowl to build an indestructible $8 billion empire that to this date is unlike any other company on the earth.
A company that is not what you think it is. This is the insane true story of Rolex. And maybe that's what makes Rolex different. It's not about telling time, it's about making history. So thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear what's possible when vision meets purpose. Because behind every Rolex is a story worth remembering.